It all starts in a house that holds more secrets than laughter. A house that witnessed the collapse of families and the silence of broken hearts. A house that became the stage for every split, every argument, and every hidden truth. And now, with the latest episode of Sister Wives, the calm exterior begins to shatter again, as layers of deception, denial, and distance start to reveal what really happened behind the cameras, and why one daughter's words may finally expose it all. In this haunting new chapter, the energy around the Brown family feels heavier than ever, because behind every polite smile and scripted scene, there lies the truth of what each of them endured when the cameras stopped rolling, when the lights dimmed, and when reality crept back in. It starts with moves that seemed innocent enough, Mykelti's move in the summer of 2024, and then Cody and Robin's relocation months later, but the timelines don't quite match up, and neither do the emotions. The show paints a picture of transitions and fresh starts, yet what we see unfolding is far darker. The illusion of harmony breaks apart as financial stress, hidden motives, and unspoken resentment take center stage, while viewers were led to believe that selling Coyote Pass was just a practical decision. Whispers suggest it was a desperate act to sustain a lifestyle that spiraled far beyond their means. An opulent house with more square footage, more rooms, more grandeur, but behind those massive doors linger the sounds of silence where love once lived, now replaced by distance and disconnection, and the question that echoes through it all. Where is Dayton? The silence around him grows louder with every passing scene, and while Robin and Cody flaunt their new chapter, the math doesn't add up, because 500 square feet does not make a mansion 40% more space, does not make peace and luxury, cannot replace the family they lost. So when the storm hit literally and metaphorically, it was more than a tornado on screen. It was the chaos that's been circling this family for years now, coming home with nowhere else to go. As the storm clears, the truth begins to settle like dust on the walls of the opulent new home. The calm after. The chaos doesn't bring peace, it brings realization. Because while the family moves furniture and boxes behind the scenes, emotions are unraveling faster than any storm could tear through the land. And this is where the real story begins. Madison steps into the light. Not on the show, but through her own voice, answering questions from people who have been watching for years, wondering what really happened behind the curtain. She begins to speak, not with anger, but with honesty, a kind of raw clarity that can only come after years of silence. She posts about her father, about what it feels like to hear your own story twisted in front of the world, and she says your dad saying lies about you for the entire world to hear teaches you real quick what it means to protect yourself, and those words slice through the illusion like a knife through fabric. Because suddenly the image of a perfect patriarch starts to fade, replaced by a man who speaks loudly but listens to no one. And as her words spread, fans realize that maybe the truth has been sitting in plain sight all along, in the patterns, in the behaviors, in the way every family member slowly drifted away. The more Cody and Robin drew closer together when she talks about boundaries. It sounds simple, but you can feel the pain behind every sentence, because when you grow up in a family where boundaries never existed, setting them as an adult feels like climbing a mountain in the dark. She says, make it about you. I need this too. Continue, my family will have this. I'm sorry, I'm not available right now. And you can almost feel the years of emotional weight in those small words, because she's not just talking about self-care. She's talking about survival. She's talking about building a wall to protect her own children from the cycle she lived through. And that is where the audience begins to see the truth. Robin, the woman often portrayed as misunderstood, the one who cries, the one who pleads for peace, is now being called something else entirely. Madison says Robin is a liar, and not in the way people say things online, but with a conviction that comes from experience. She says if her mouth is moving, she is manipulating in such a calculated way that you will not know up from down. And it's not just bitterness, it's recognition. It's years of observing patterns of emotional control, of seeing how stories get rewritten and how people get played against each other. And the moment that sentence leaves her lips, fans begin to rethink everything they've seen. Because maybe the tears were not pain, but performance. Maybe the apologies were not healing, but strategy. Maybe the kindness was not compassion, but camouflage. People who knew Robin before, the fame, before the lights, before the cameras, have their own stories, and they sound hauntingly similar whispers from Montana. stories of manipulation, competition, and the relentless need to win every argument, every comparison, every affection. They talk about how she needed to be the best, even if it meant breaking what was whole. She took things not out of love, but out of pride. And what Madison confirms feels like the missing piece of the puzzle. Because behind every storyline of heartbreak and betrayal, there was always one person who somehow stayed untouched, untarnished, untouched by blame, protected by Cody, defended by narrative, and now the facade begins to crack. She remembers the past. The way Robin's history always had a convenient twist, how exes were turned into villains, how sympathy was currency, and how tragedy was used to silence truth. And for the first time, we begin to see that maybe this isn't about a family breaking apart. Maybe it's about one trying to survive. The weight of another's control, and while Robin and Cody are busy defending their choices, their lavish homes, and their fractured sense of faith, Madison is busy reclaiming her peace, building something her parents never could: stability, because when you grow up in chaos, quiet feels like luxury. As the pieces of truth begin to align, the silence between the Brown family members grows louder than any argument ever could, and through that silence, new voices start to rise. Maddie's reflections open the door, but behind her others begin to whisper too, each one carrying the scars of growing up in a world that claimed to be built on love, yet functioned through control. Her words about reading parenting books in 2020 are simple yet powerful, because it marks the moment she began to see the cycle for what it was: the rules, the obedience, the guilt dressed as devotion. She says she never looked back, and that single sentence speaks volumes. It was the year when isolation forced everyone to see their reflection for the first time, without the filter of family approval, without the weight of loyalty, without the rehearsed script. And as she read about healthy parenting boundaries, communication, and empathy, she realized that what she once called discipline might have been something else entirely. She began to notice how certain behaviors that were normalized were never nurturing, and how love given in exchange for compliance is not love at all. And through that self-awareness, she began to heal. And as she did, the image of Cody and Robin as misunderstood leaders began to crumble, because the patterns became too clear. The emotional distance from some children, the favoritism toward others, the moments where humility was replaced by defensiveness when asked what made her finally see that Cody and Robin only cared about themselves. She didn't hesitate. She said, in 2020, after I started learning about real parenting, and that answer echoes in the hearts of viewers who have watched the same. Dynamics play out season after season, because what once looked like leadership now looks like manipulation disguised as moral authority. And what once seemed like a family structure now feels like a hierarchy built on fear and performance. And as if that revelation wasn't heavy enough, Maddie didn't stop there. She spoke about Mary, the woman who once held power through strictness and presence, and her words painted a picture of a woman who carried her own wounds, yet passed them down. In the form of harshness, she says Mary was hard, that she believes her father contributed to Mary's pain, that forgiveness is possible, but access is not, because healing does not mean returning to harm. And those words carry a kind of finality that chills you. Forgiveness without reunion, compassion without reconciliation, the line that divides past and future. And she made it clear that while she forgives Mary, she will never allow her near her children, not out of vengeance, but protection. And that statement alone says everything about how deep those childhood wounds run, because multiple siblings say the same. McKelty, Pate, and others, none of them want Mary near their kids, and fans who watch the show for years begin to wonder what really happened behind closed doors, because it couldn't have been just strictness. It couldn't have been just house rules. The tone, the reactions, the fear all point to something more, something unspoken, and in that quiet gap between what's said and unsaid lies the truth. No one wants to face generations of patterns handed down from one broken home to the next. A culture where control was called love, where loyalty was demanded, not earned, and where children were expected to accept pain as part of belonging. And now, as Maddie steps into motherhood, she refuses to let that cycle continue. She speaks about therapy, about seeking professional help, about learning what safety actually feels like. And in her voice, there's no anger, only clarity. The kind of peace that comes from finally understanding that healing is not rebellion, it's survival. And as she reveals her husband Caleb's health challenges, his chronic kidney disease, his fight to stay stable, you see the difference between their world and the one she left behind. Because while Cody and Robin chase image and control, Maddie and Caleb face reality together quietly, without cameras, without chaos. And it's that contrast that says everything love built on honesty, even through pain versus love built on control. Even through denial, the Brown family has always lived in extremes. But now those extremes have faces. Pain and peace. Truth and illusion, past and future. And somewhere in that divide, Maddie stands holding, her truth steady and unshaken, as the final threads of this story weave together the image of the Brown family that once stood as a symbol of unity, now feels like a mirror shattered into 1,000 reflections, each piece telling a different version of the same truth. And in those reflections, we begin to see what fame, faith, and fractured loyalty can do to a family that once believed they could hold it all together. The cameras roll, the confessions come, the stories twist, but the eyes tell everything. And when you look closely at Cody and Robin's world, now it's not love, you see it's fear. Fear of losing control, fear of exposure, fear of realizing that the children who once looked up to them now look away. And while the show continues to tell stories of houses and finances and supposed reconciliation, the real drama has already left the screen and moved into the quiet spaces of social media, where honesty has no filter. Maddie's revelations have opened a floodgate of truth, not to destroy, but to reclaim the narrative, because when one voice speaks, it gives permission for others to rise. And now every post, every subtle message from the other children feels like a spark of rebellion, not against faith, but against the silence that kept them small for so long. Even as Cody tries to defend himself through interviews and commentary, the words ring hollow, because the audience has already seen the truth behind his eyes, the exhaustion of keeping a story alive that no one believes anymore. And Robin, the eternal victim, now faces a different kind of spotlight, one that asks not for tears, but for accountability. She built her comfort on the idea of sacrifice. Yet every decision points back to self-preservation. Every promise feels rehearsed. Every apology feels timed for sympathy. And it's not hatred that the viewers feel, it's disappointment, a collective sadness watching what once was a family dissolve into fragments of what could have been, because at its core, Sister Wives was never about plural marriage or property. It was about belonging, the human need to be seen, to be valued, to be safe. And as each of the children steps into adulthood, they're rewriting that definition for themselves. They no longer need the patriarch to define their worth. They no longer need permission to protect their peace. They no longer need to live under the illusion that loyalty means silence. And as for Mary, her quiet presence speaks louder than any confession. Her absence from their lives is both a warning and a wound, proof that pain repeats itself until someone chooses to stop it. And Maddie did. She stopped it with boundaries, with therapy, with truth, with the decision to say, "This ends with me." And as she shares her life with Caleb, her husband's illness becomes not just a challenge, but a testament to their resilience, because even in the shadow of uncertainty, their home is calm, their hearts aligned, their choices grounded in empathy, not ego. They may not have the grand house or the scripted drama, but they have something far more valuable: peace. And as the audience watches the final scenes of this unraveling family, we realize that maybe this was never a story about loss, but about liberation. Because sometimes breaking apart is the only way to find wholeness again. And as the episode fades to black, the question lingers, not what happened to the Browns, but what will happen next, when truth finally replaces narrative, and when those who were once silenced begin to tell their story in their own words, unfiltered, unafraid, and unstoppable. She sat there for a long time after he left, staring at the empty space he had occupied, that imprint of warmth and chaos he always left behind. It wasn't love anymore. It wasn't even longing. It was addiction, to the intensity, to the mystery, to the what if. She replayed the moment when their eyes met one last time, when he said nothing, but everything was written in the silence. That silence echoed louder than words, louder than apologies, louder than promises that were never meant to be kept. For the first time, she realized she was never in love with him. She was in love with the version of herself she became when she was around him. Brave, reckless, unfiltered, alive. He had unlocked something in her she couldn't put back in the box. But he was chaos, and she was someone